This week, Jeff Schilling, the CSO of Armor, joins us for our interview to talk about cloud-based security, incident response, and making the transition from the Army into security. In the news, LogRhythm has been named in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Lumeta introduces a comprehensive solution for IoT. Optiv helps organizations optimize software security. CA is in the news, as is Fortinet with a product announcement, getting control of your cloud, and some predictions for 2018, in addition to some news from RiskSense. All that and more on to this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The teleprompter now has artificial intelligence, Doug, and updates itself. It's awesome. This week, and talk about them as it relates to enterprise security. You're going to do great.
I think that people think that you and I talk like every day at night. You know, It's like, hey, what are you doing? It's kind of a bit of an exhausting week, and I think that we noticed that a little bit in the stories for this week as well.
LogRhythm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logRhythm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer's sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome everyone to episode 72 of Enterprise Security Weekly. For December 13th, 2017. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined on the lines via Skype by John Strand. John, welcome to the program.
Damn good to be back, sir.
Yes, nice to have you back. I'm excited about this episode. Before we get started, quick announcement from our friends at itpro.tv. I was actually just talking to a listener of Enterprise Security Weekly that was like, I had never heard of itpro.tv, and as soon as I heard you guys talking about it and I saw the interview that you did with Tim on Startup Security Weekly, he's like, I went out and I bought, like a full year, and he's like, now I'm using it and really liking it, so we're talking about some of our internal teams at my organization that we're going to buy a company subscription. And so, I mean, there is no other resounding kind of announcement that we have about itpro TV other than our listeners really like it and are benefiting from it. So it's not just us promoting it, but our feedback, the feedback from our listeners has been positive. So make sure you go to itpro.tv/enterprise security.
And on the other side of that fence, it's really cool whenever we do have vendors that show up, whenever we have like big episodes, like what was it, episode 500 or something like that.
They were there for that.
They showed up and they were there, they're hanging out, drinking, making drinks, and basically alcohol was involved. So we like itpro TV because they bring alcohol, I guess.
Now, if you're watching the show live, you may want to stay tuned and go to securityweekly.com/LogRhythm. Register for that webcast. At 3 o'clock, I'm going to be talking to Chris Martin about LogRhythm's security intelligence, but they've also expanded into kind of this new category they're creating for themselves. They're now playing on the endpoint, on the network, on the SIM side, threat intelligence. They can help you with email phishing, and they basically incorporated end-user behavior analytics into their solution. So we're going to talk about all the ways in which LogRhythm can help your organization, kind of help you weed through the problems that they solve and why they do it better than anyone else. So if you're in the market for a security solution of any kind, I strongly recommend that you check out the webinar today, as we're going to talk about how LogRhythm does it. They've been a long-time sponsor and going to continue into 2018. I'm very excited because they represent that security vendor, John, that I think you and I search for. That it's like, can we just get one vendor to do a bunch of things really well and integrate with a bunch of things, even if you decide not to do all of the LogRhythm thing, and just really help your SOC analyst be effective? And I think that's what LogRhythm has created.
And the other thing is, like, as we've talked in the past, we fired vendors that come and they sponsor the shows because their products are flaming like garbage heaps.
Yeah.
And we, with Logarithm, and I also throw Tenable in this category, if we have a problem with the product and we're like, hey, this sucks, you should fix this. We have vendors that have been on the show and they're like, well, okay, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And then other vendors try to jump on it very quickly. And Logarithm is one of those vendors that listens very closely to what we're talking about, and it very much tightly aligns with what we're looking for. So it's cool. It's cool.
Awesome. Our feature interview today is, we'd like to welcome to the program Jeff Schilling, who transitioned into security in the corporate industry after a 24-year career in the Army. Career experiences in running multi-million-dollar P&L, published cloud security expert, cybersecurity incident response, network management, global enterprise services, and more. He's currently a certified information security manager and worked closely with U.S. Cyber Command, the National Security Agency, and the Defense Information Systems Agency. We'd like to welcome Jeff Schilling to the program. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, great to be here.
So, Jeff, we have some topics that we want to talk about today. I guess first, I really do want to talk about incident response first because it's one of those topics that our audience really wanted to hear more about this year, and we've done a lot of interviews talking about incident response. Specifically, let's talk about your background in the Army and how you applied that to be more effective at incident response in the enterprise.
Well, a little bit about my background in the Army. The last two jobs that I worked was I kind of have a hard time believing it myself. I ran the Security and Operations Center for an organization called Joint Task Force Global Network Operations, which later became Cyber Command. And then my last job in the military, I ran the Security and Operations Center for Army Cyber Command. So a lot of times when I meet people and they say, hey, I've got a scale problem, I have to, I can cry on their shoulder and say, well, I definitely got some scale war stories to tell you, and trying to defend for the DoD's case, 4 million interconnected computer systems across 16,000 wide area networks. And when you talk about complexity like that and orchestrating the security and incident response across there, you really have to have policies that start at the top and make sense as they echelon down to the regional security and operations centers so that they can execute off of them. And I feel like that's, in the military, at least when I was in those, sitting on top of those two security stacks, some of the two largest security stacks, in the world, I felt like we didn't quite have that right all the time. Sometimes the people at the top were trying to do, stick their fingers in and push technical policies too low instead of giving them the intent of what we were trying to achieve. So I'd say coming out of the military, that was probably the biggest thing that I learned out of that experience.
I mean, that is, and this is an understatement, a tremendous communications effort that has to take place when we talk about incident response and then doing it the scale that you were doing. What are some communications lessons that you've learned that you can share with our audience with respects to incident response?
Well, I'll talk about it in kind of a 360-degree framework. First off, I was the guy that was talking to 3- and 4-star generals who for the most part understood the technology, what we were doing, but they were not necessarily day-to-day experts. Probably the same challenge that a lot of IT professionals in the civilian world have communicating with their board of directors and their investors. And so understanding how I could translate the operational and technical information that I got down below, from the security and operations centers that were actually doing the hands-on incident response, and translating that into decision quality information for the 3 and 4 stars to make resourcing decisions, and in some cases global policy decisions on the fly, was probably one of the biggest challenges and lessons learned. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say a question on that. Yesterday, I was talking with a bank, financial institution here in the U.S., and they kind of brought up that same problem. And this seems to be a problem that we're seeing consistently across a number of our customers at BHIS, where they say we do incident response, but whenever you look at the incident response frameworks, just taking, for example, the type of incident you may be working, they break it down to like 6 for first, and then maybe you get up to 10 types of incidents if you're working with the LU cert. Whenever you're working incident response and you're trying to go to management, whether you're talking to somebody that's a multi-star general or you're trying to talk to a CEO, what do you think is the best possible way to try to put forth what is the core problem and what are the levers that management can pull to try to help address that problem in the future?
Well, I think the way I approached it in the military was I talked about it in tiers. I tried to keep the noise level of the day-to-day incidents, say that happen at a camp post station, where you have, say you have a camp post station that has some servers that get compromised by a nation-state actor, and it's contained there and it doesn't spread. So that's actually something that you wouldn't elevate up to a global level and present that to any of the decision makers at my level. So understanding, and in the military, we had these things called commanders' information requirements, and that is basically how you defined it. And I would say it would translate into a policy in the civilian world of what are those parameters that you do elevate that up to to the decision maker that you're dealing with at your level, and what is it that is best managed. You have visibility of the incident at the lower levels, but you're not actively directing or directing the containment and eradication processes. That's all handled locally, but you're monitoring it, because when you're running a global organization and you have multiple regional security operations centers that are working, you need to be able to see if some of those indicators are showing up in other theaters. And then when you do recognize that, then you at the global level become that bridge between those two regions, and you want to get those two folks talking immediately and sharing information, and then you become the person that kind of orchestrates that. I like to say, we're really good about connecting APIs between machines, but we're horrible at connecting APIs between humans. And I felt like that was probably what I did 90% of my role doing the global incident management piece was connecting those human APIs.
Jeff, in my outsider view, when I speak to organizations in the enterprise and we talk about data classification and identifying the sensitive data and then classifying it further, a lot of organizations seem to struggle with that. In the military context, it seems like that before we had computers, data classification was a huge thing built into the culture. Did that help you, or did that kind of change as everything was transitioning to computers?
I would say as more and more as the automation kept getting pushed out further and further when I joined the military in 1988, I was the only officer I knew that had a computer on his desk. By the time I left in 2012, not only did every officer have a computer on their desk, but just about nearly every soldier was connected. And so as we started to leverage more and more information and push it out to those soldiers, it became more difficult to keep that segmentation and classification, because you could have things that could be classified that should be segmented away from public knowledge. But then little pieces kind of matriculate out into different pieces of information. And when you put all those information together, say a threat actor is able to compromise a knowledge base, you put all those information together, they could actually have a good idea of what are some of our classified information. But you're right. The advantage that we had inside the military is that we did have a strong classification process that started before we had IT systems, and then we also built some really good segmentation between those different. I mean, they're basically different computer systems that handle each of those classification layers. The challenge that businesses have is that their IT organization is flat and the information is all over the place. So now they've got to go back and figure out how do I find the data, and then how do I put the right meta tags on that data to ensure that that it makes sense, and I can query that and control and put controls in place to make sure it's only seen by the folks who are supposed to be seen. So I'd say that's
so
a big
I got
challenge.
a question. I got a question for you. Based on your experience in the Army, I don't know if you saw it, but in the past couple of weeks, there was a large debate that came up. Were you familiar with the 255 Sierra program for training warrant officers in computer security whenever you were in the Army?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, very cool. So the debate came up, and I'll just kind of rephrase it for the people that are listening to the show and give you an opportunity to kind of hear what it went. The debate came up that we train these people in the Army in cybersecurity skills, and we spend a tremendous amount of time and effort and money training these people in this deep security skills set. And then these people get pulled, and then they end up posting and doing guard duty. And some people online said that there was an argument against that says that's stupid. These people are highly trained, highly specialized, and having them guard a post makes no sense whatsoever. And the argument they say, would you have someone that's trained in medical guard a post? And then there were other people that say we're all part of the Army. We all have to maintain a core set of skills. We all have to do the crap tasks as well. And being kind of, you were in the Army for a long time, you understood the cyber domain. What is your take on that? Whenever you have people that are highly trained in computer security, how should we be using them? And does it make sense to have them actually stand post, let's say, outside of a gate somewhere on a base?
Sure. So a warrant officer is actually not the type of person who would go out and cut grass or stand guard. I mean, they're actually a highly trained officer. They're a commissioned officer, and they're usually more in supervisory roles or highly.
It could have been some of the people in the 25 Delta program as well. But yeah, either way, people that have cybersecurity.
Where you would run into that challenge would obviously be with the soldiers, the highly talented soldiers that we pick out of their basic training that seem to have a knack for security. Usually they come out of the Signal Corps in the Army, and then they're then we put them through some very extensive training. It is kind of a tough. A lot of times those folks, the highly skilled ones, are going to be working at installations where they don't have those regular soldierly duties, and a lot of times there are controls. I really think that it's. While it is a topic of discussion, I don't think that it's a real needle mover discussion, because I think that it's very rare that you would see a highly trained soldier that's doing security at the strategic level, say working for the NSA or one of the other intel communities out there pulling guard duty or cutting grass. Now, we are pushing those skill sets into the tactical organizations and the deployable units, which I think is a great idea. It was a big gap we had for most of my military career. And when you're a part of those organizations, I was part of the 82nd Airborne Division, and I was expected to jump out of an airplane, just like everybody else was, and you're expected to be able to perform at the same level as as your fellow combat troops. So I would say it's even more than just pulling guard duty. A lot of times it's around doing the additional combat training that's required when they're in the AOR, because everybody becomes a soldier, becomes an infantryman when they're in an area of operations where there's combat operations. So what you don't want to do for those young soldiers, those talented soldiers, you don't want to create like they're special, like they have special privilege, because then that would also work against them in some of the team dynamics inside the unit. So I think good commanders and who kind of orchestrate what duties these highly talented soldiers do, I think will use good judgment and make sure that if they got an important mission or they've got something they need to do, that they're going to have the availability that they need. But when they're serving in a tactical organization and they're expected to do the same task as all the rest of the soldiers, I think you really kind of put them in a bad place if they don't do that.
Jeff, how does that relate to some of the challenges that we have today in the enterprise, where we're implementing an incident response program and we need other team members from different disciplines to all participate when there is an incident? And I think some of the communication struggle is, I'm a security person. I know that we have an incident that I have to involve sysadmins, data owners, process owners, management, legal, in all these different areas, and they all may have to stop what they're doing to respond to the incident. What advice do you have for those in the enterprise that are in that particular situation?
Well, one thing, there is a compliance requirement for most companies out there that have that store or process regulated data, that they have to conduct tabletop exercise, and the minimum is once a year. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we're doing ours next year. And I think the way that you break down some of those cultural barriers is you try to do those type of exercises once a month. And you try to make the logistics of pulling off these exercises such that it's not a huge drag on the team's time. And that's the way we design ours. And our tabletop exercises are a multifunctional exercise. And inside of each of those inside of our incident response plans, what we do with our tabletops is we say we're going to exercise these two playbooks this time. And I think that having that structure to go in and actually practice what you would do in a real thing helps break down some of those communications barriers when the incident actually kicks off. And people know where to go. The playbooks help because inside of our playbooks, we have contact info of the people from the other teams that need to be a part of the what we call a major incident management team. And we have a war room to go to, and just practicing that getting together, I think helps. Now, the daily burn of, say, an incident that maybe doesn't raise to the level, maybe it's not a data breach, maybe it's just, dealing with compromised servers or infected servers, that doesn't always raise to the level of where you would bring together a team. And I'd say that's probably where the challenges is. And that's where a ticketing system that allows you to hold other stakeholders accountable for not being responsive to your information needs to work down what I would call the daily grind of normal incidents is probably where a lot of people have a lot of room to improve on.
John, more questions on incident response? I just want to go to you first.
No, very good answer. So
one of the trends that we've talked about for a long time on our shows is the transition into the cloud and cloud-based security, and how a lot of organizations still to this day are hesitant to move into the cloud because it's not as secure. Now, from the Army standpoint, it's somewhat of a different issue. From what I understand, there's the federated cloud as well, and you're dealing with sensitive information that you may not want on a cloud server. What advice do you have for organizations today that are in that decision-making process? Do I push this out to the cloud? Do I not? Because I don't think the cloud is secure.
Yeah, I think it was when Robert Mueller was FBI director, I think it's back in 2012 or 13, he said there are two types of companies, ones that know they've been compromised and the ones that don't. And I would say as kind of a spin off of that, there are two types of companies out there: the ones that are going to the cloud, the ones that know they're going to the cloud, and the ones that don't know yet. Mm-hmm. I think that business owners are pushing for that agility, and the security teams really need to get on board and understand that there actually is a huge advantage in being able to build. For me, the key to securing a enterprise or a data center, we focus on data center security, is building an architecture that's defendable, and with the ability to orchestrate your whole environment using software makes you incredibly agile and makes you able to actually verify that the settings and ACLs that you may have, between your segmentation are actually there. And I actually jumped on the cloud bandwagon when I was in the military. I was asked to give a speech at a local security conference on cloud. And it's kind of a funny story. I showed up there, and one of my folks was actually at the conference when I showed up to do my speaking event. And trust me, I'd literally started my research off by going to Wikipedia and figuring out what do they mean by cloud and virtualization, because I'd been a part of your traditional data center approach in the military. And this guy who was sitting there from our organization looked at me. I said, "Jack, what are you doing here?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, "I'm here to see the DoD's expert on cloud security." And I was like, "Cool." I said, "When is he or she speaking so I can listen to him too?" And then he showed me the program, and it was me. They billed me as the DoD's cloud security expert. So it turned out that when I was doing that research for that speaking event is where I really became a believer that most of the problems that I had running the DoD Security and Operations Center and the Army Security and Operations Center, I always felt like I was fighting a design problem. I had way too much surface area of attack, and I had really no way to orchestrate the security controls and the architecture to barely even build a defendable perimeter, much less put in the segmentation inside the perimeter. That really is what slows down and stops an advanced threat of being able to move laterally across an environment. So I'm all in on the cloud. I came to Armor because that's what they specialize was in cloud security, and I don't think that there are going to be many companies 10 years from now that don't have at least some play in the public cloud. Mm.
Well, and kind of on that question with moving into the cloud, one of the things that we find interesting whenever people start talking about container security, Docker security, cloud security to a somewhat lesser extent, is if you were a vendor or a service provider in almost any other field, if you're talking antivirus, endpoint security, web application, firewall security, a lot of those technologies are known quantities, right? There's something that people have been doing for like 15, 20 years. Whenever you start moving into cloud security, and you start dealing with that, this is something that changes like monthly, maybe even faster than that in some situations. It goes through these weird bursts. So whenever you're sitting at Armor, How do you guys handle the fact that it's almost impossible to say, hey, look, we're complete cloud experts and security experts, because everything you know right now shifts. Like 2-3 months, Amazon comes up with new services and things change all over the place all over again. How is it that you guys handle that constant churn in this specific marketplace that you guys are sitting in right now?
So our approach is actually pretty simple. What we've done is we spent all of our intellectual property on building a security platform that we call Spartan, that is basically a log ingestion engine that correlates, uses machine learning and advanced artificial intelligence to basically correlate and to find anomaly, find that proverbial needle in the haystack. So because our architecture is built, basically with a SOA approach, we're able to as Amazon, Azure, Rackspace, and all those other cloud hosting companies, as they expose data, say in Azure and OMS or AWS came up with Guard Duty, I think is a new product they released a couple of weeks ago. We have the logging appliances that we put into our customer environments that allow us to consume that data. And then as we learn, what are the data types, what we've decided to do is to not build any endpoint tools ourselves, but build things that can detect the data, ingest the data, and then we can provide analysis.
I thought you guys did have an agent, though. Didn't you have an agent for monitoring of, it's like Armor Anywhere, I think is what it's called?
Yes. Yeah, so the agent is how we deliver our services. We do OS logging, we do malware detection, we do file integrity management, all the things you would expect to happen, patch monitoring, vulnerability scanning. Some of those are actually third-party products that we put into that agent. Some of it are functionality that we built into the agent ourselves, like we have remote code execution capability. So if the customer needs us to do some type of proactive measures inside their cloud, we can. But that's the agent is just a delivery mechanism and then we also have a separate logging appliance that we can also put into the environment to consume whatever AWS, Azure, or other clouds will expose to us. Or even if a customer has, say, a Palo Alto next generation firewall, we can consume. All we want to do is consume the syslogs and then bring them back into our infrastructure and then analyze them and then apply our intelligence to it.
Now, you guys have all of that kind of feeds back into you guys as a managed security solution, and you guys are monitoring all of this for all of your customers, which is awesome. One of the questions that I like to ask anybody that comes up that is running a company, because Paul and I know this very well, how hard is it for you to find qualified candidates to actually go through and staff your SOC?
It's actually very tough. Luckily, we have a great security team, a nucleus that we built up over the last 4 years of folks. A lot of them are like me, former government. Some of them military, some of them just former civilians that worked inside the intel community, and usually great people attract other great people. And we also, because we have a infrastructure as a service business, is also a part of one of our other products. We also have an internal pipeline, because one of the hardest things to find out there is somebody who really understands Linux and can flip down the goggles and not look at Linux as a sysadmin, but look at Linux as a incident responder doing host forensics. And so we take some of our sharpest L3 engineers for Linux, and then we send them through a very rigorous training program, and we kind of build our own for our incident response and forensics team. So it's a little bit of good people attract other good people, as well as building our own team from internal.
And then I have one more question. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of people that do SOC or they do MSSP is this constant balance that you're trying to achieve, right? On one side, you're trying to protect your customers, and on the other side, you actually do incident response and detection. And sometimes that balance can be exceedingly difficult, because customers can come back and say, if you would have done your job at protecting us, this would have never have happened. How is it that you're working? How do you guys work with customers, especially ones that aren't very mature and don't understand that dynamic? How do you guys start bringing your customers in to understand that, yes, you are working to protect their network, but still things may happen, and you need to be prepared with that incident response and detection capability. Basically, how do you prevent customers from thinking that you're going to be the end-all be-all of silver bullets of computer security and make them understand true risk?
Well, the great thing about the cloud, incident response is so much easier in the cloud. Let's talk about our two products. We have our own hosted solution, which we call Armor Complete, which is a secure cloud hosting that we actually present as infrastructure as a service. We do full forensics in there because our team can connect to our customers through a permissions access management process and a jump host that we can securely connect to there, and we can actually leverage our knowledge to a lot of times fix things that they can't fix themselves while the system is still in production and still operating. And a lot of times what we see are, most of what our incident response team deals with are content management systems using open source software. As you know, there's a ton of shopping cart vulnerabilities that are out there. We're constantly detecting those and try to mitigate them, within 24 hours for our customers. So it lowers one, keeps it from spreading laterally to other servers and getting to their data and preventing that breach. In the public cloud, we offer the same incident response services to our customers, but what we found is, incident response is made of analysis. You do analysis first, and then you find all the infected hosts, then you do your containment plan, and then eradication, and then recovery. What we found that the biggest service we provide to them, and when we open that first ticket and we show the indicator of compromise that shows us that they potentially have a problem, all the context that we put around that indicator really kind of tells that developer, I can't believe I left SSH open to the world on my database server. What the hell was I thinking? So a lot of times it's something really simple that the developer will take a look at that ticket. And because a lot of our public cloud customers are using automation frameworks such as Ansible, Puppet, Chef, it's really easy for them to go in and change that script inside their automation framework and basically take a few minutes of downtime, completely tear down that environment, and then respin it with all new, with that flaw fixed. And what they've also done when they respin it is they've also broken the persistence that the threat actors had inside their environment. And to me, that's the true power of the cloud. If everybody was to move to that type of DevOps sec approach, we wouldn't be hearing any more articles about, the average dwell time is 149 days or 79 days, whichever report that you believe.
No, that's so true. Yeah, huge believer. Even on the cloud side, containers aside, if you have those orchestration and management components, like you mentioned, Ansible and Puppet and Chef, or any one of those three, and you're in a cloud environment, that's huge winning right there to be able to respond and do instant response, like you said, Jeff. So I think it's a great point.
Yeah, containment and eradication are almost too easy for our customers to do. In fact, I had a customer in that we were trying to sell on our Armor Anywhere product, and they were moving to the cloud. And they had an old-time incident response guy in the meeting, and he just couldn't wrap his head around that concept. He said, if you're protecting 1,000 servers, I expect you to do instant response on all 1,000 servers. And I said, well, it depends on what your objectives are of the incident response. I said, if you're trying to get attribution and figure out, how it's spread, that's fine. We can, but that's not the scope of our service. Our scope of our service is to detect, analyze, contain, eradicate, and recover. And so I think that that there's going to be a new mindset with security, joining the agility that the DevOps teams are enjoying inside the cloud once they get fully on board.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you.
Okay, I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. With that, we're going to take a short break. Come back, talk about the enterprise security news, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.